Good evening, I'm Greer McGeary, President of Seahorse Victoria. My guest tonight is Monique Jade. Welcome.
Thank you, Greer. It's good to be here.
One of the things I usually ask a guest is, when did you sort of first understand that there was something different about you that wasn't quite what you were being brought up as?
Oh, I always knew I was different growing up, but I didn't know what. And it wasn't until 2017 when I decided I had to change my life after drinking a bottle of Bundy a day and smoking, and that's all I was doing. When I stopped drinking, it's when the brain fog had cleared and I realised that I was actually trans.
How did you sort of feel back then, thinking, am I a boy or am I a girl, or do I know what I am?
Well, being brought up in a Christian family, it was a case of I was brought up as a boy. There was nothing else but I was given all the boy things to do. Even though I had an older sister, it was always the boy things. Did things with dad, all male things. There was nothing to do with any female. So my parents kept me sort of on that track for my whole life. Even when I left school, I was at a all-boys school. Then I left school and was working with dad, joined the Navy, still all boys. And
So in those very early days when you were getting all the boy stuff, what were you sort of feeling and thinking you would like to do, notwithstanding what was happening, being brought up as a boy? But how did you sort of feel and what were you thinking?
uncomfortable, and I didn't know. Because we had a gay living in the same street as us, I knew I wasn't gay. I wasn't attracted to men, and at that age you wouldn't know anyway, because I wasn't even attracted to girls or boys at that stage. And just as I was growing up, I didn't know. I just knew I was different. What was different about me, no one knew, because trans weren't around in those days, and they weren't talked about.
Well, that's right, not overtly around, but were you growing up in the city or in a country environment?
I actually grew up in Preston. It wasn't until 1975, at the age of 15, that we moved to the peninsula.
In that early primary school period of your life, did you sort of feel fit in with the rest of the boys at school?
No. I didn't play the boys' games. I didn't play football, didn't play cricket at school. So it was just a case of most of the time I was sitting by myself.
What were the things that you would like to have done?
At that age, I don't know at this stage. It's something I probably can't answer because it was too long ago. Yeah. If I'd have known what it was where I was in, now, like I am now, things might have been different. Yeah. But not knowing any different at that stage of my life. Because
of the strictness of your upbringing and being so long ago, it's sort of like a fog in your life.
It is. Much of that, yeah. So, and even at tech school, it was just a case of go to school, learn, come home. And it was all, everything to do with boys. There was no sport at the school. The school wasn't big enough to have a football team or anything else. So that was just a case of go home and sit around the house and do nothing, basically. You
said you went to tech school. So what aspects of manual skills that were you learning?
With the tech school, I actually got into electrical. The final year of tech school, we attended Collingwood Tech to make up some electronic equipment, electric motors. And then after leaving school, I did 3 years of an electrical apprenticeship before actually joining the Navy.
Besides the actual career part of your skill, why did you join the Navy?
I had to get off the peninsula for a while. I actually applied for the Army and got knocked back. They said I was unstable. So I walked straight at the Army recruiting office and went straight into the Navy, and they took me. Yeah. So it was in a couple of months I was in the Navy.
Did you sort of feel that there was some pressure to join the military of any sort?
No, it was back in the late 70s when work was scarce as well. So it was an employment opportunity, and also to do a bit of travelling with the Navy, going overseas and such.
You've got your electrical skills there. So was that basically what you did in the Navy?
No, I did actually engineering in the Navy. So it was playing with steam boilers and engines.
Putting your pre-Navy skills to good use by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was. But even once I got out the Navy and such, I worked in a couple of places, and then ended up going back to school and doing a certificate of basic electronics and started doing the associate diploma, but haven't got the brain for it. Yeah. I found some of the subjects just too hard.
While we're in the Navy, as it were, so whereabouts were you primarily based, or were you sort of lots of different ports?
To start off with, you're down here at Cerberus in the Western Port. And then depending on what you join as and where you go, you can. I went to a ship, so I was on a ship for 2 years. Then I went to a training establishment in New South Wales for apprentices. I was there for 3 years before returning to the same ship, which I was on for 6 months. Then I went to another ship, the sister ship, for 6 months, and then I took my discharge after 7 years.
In that time in the Navy, doing all that thing, how did you sort of cope with, mentally to deal with what's become this side of your life?
With the life in the Navy, it was easy because you're in a large mess of at least 60 sailors. So it's all males. It's not like it is nowadays where you got male and females on board. So in those days it was just male. So you didn't have a chance because when the ship was at sea in the engineering department, you're working 4 hours on, 8 hours off because due to the heat of the engine room and the boiler room. So you don't get much time. There's no time for sleeping. There's no time for doing any of this. So in your 8 hours off each time, you're spending a lot of it sleeping and you come off, watch, have a meal, shower and you go back to bed.
So you really aren't in a position where you sort of think, I'd rather be out experimenting with clothes and things like that, are you?
Yes, but I tell you, we did do it once in Singapore. Each payday, everyone put in $2 for the mess fund, and that was used to pay for items for the mess, like if we wanted a video or video player, TV. That money paid for all that. But once we were on our homeward bounders from doing the Northwest Indian Ocean trip in 81, we stopped in a Singapore and they decided to have it was a steakless mess end of trip celebration, but they called it something else.
Yeah.
And the dress of the party had to wear a dress to get into the party. That was only for the stakers, so that made...
So it gave you an opportunity that you didn't otherwise have.
It did. And also they had the ship's concert as well. So, and then they had the Miss... I was on the Brisbane, so it was a Miss Brisbane. But I never got to go in that. They picked someone else to do that. It was quite short and had a bit of body.
Might touch on something you mentioned a bit earlier about drinking and stuff. So did that really take place, a lot of that, once you got into the Navy? And
No, because of being a rum drinker from the time I was 16, believe it or not, I couldn't drink beer without being sick. So when the ship was at sea, we got 2 cans of beer per man, per day, perhaps. And so I didn't drink until we went ashore. And then I had to find something that I could drink. So it was very rarely that when I was in the Navy, that I was on the ship, that I did drink. The drinking happened more so after my marriage had failed in around about 1998.
Relationship breakups sort of put a lot of stress on everyone. You said you're also a heavy smoker, I think, from something said earlier. Were you a smoker from a very young age, or did you pick that up in later life?
I started smoking somewhere around about the age of 14. I stopped when I got married, and my son was born in 1990. And then after we separated, I took it up again, as you say, with the stress and so forth. And
I was a heavy smoker from after I left school and went to work, and up until I was about 30, and then I, with my dad sort of developing a emphysema in one of his lungs and eventually having a lung removed, that sort of provided the incentive to stop and never take it up again. So I've been rather fortunate. But those things sort of add to the tenseness and anxiety that you obviously have, because I think a lot of us experience, things like heavy smoking and heavy drinking. It's a way of trying to escape something, but at the same time, it's exacerbating the issue. So you said that your marriage failed, but you've got how many children?
4 children.
4 children. Before we get on to later in your life, but how did the relationship with your children go from the marriage breakup?
When we first broke up, it was rocky.
Yeah.
Would have killed each other if we had the chance. And then after a while, we put our differences aside and started doing things together with the kids. And over 20 years, we've still remained friends.
Did you sort of out yourself as to your partner before you got married? Or?
No, because I still didn't know I was trans in those days. I was following the norm of what was expected of getting married, having kids, which is what a lot of other people do as well. And it wasn't until there's a couple of times in my younger days when we were living at Preston, I did wear my sister's clothes when I was home by myself. I got into my sister's clothes once. There wasn't many times I could do that. And then again, when we were married, I was home alone. The kids were in kinder and so forth, and I was wearing the extra clothes when I could. But that's as far as it went until that was the 90s, and until the 2017 when I decided to stop drinking, when the brain actually came into it, and it was cleared.
So you're obviously secretly dressing and things like that. So you get to 2017. So had you sorted out by then, you know, the way you worked with your ex-partner and the kids, or
No,
only since then?
That was since then with the kids and that. It's once I stopped drinking and I could think straight, that's when I'll be figuring out that I was actually trans, because the alcohol was blocking my thinking thought. Within 2018, after I'd started my journey, I then told my ex before telling my kids.
Yeah.
Because once I told my kids, they needed someone to go and talk to, apart from me. So they had their mother there as well.
So how did your ex react when you outed yourself?
I won't say it on camera, but
No, but
she said I was an idiot.
With difficulty, obviously.
Yeah, she called me a few names under the sun. And
in outing yourself to the kids, how did that go?
well, we were trying to hold back on telling them because I had one in Canada at the time, and we were waiting to find out when she was coming home so we could spring it on all of them together in person, not over the phone. And unfortunately, my ex was talking to her on the phone one day. She took a photo of me. I wasn't wearing a dress or anything else. I was just in a normal polo shirt, painted fingernails, and I had new glasses. And she sent it to my daughter in Canada. She sent it to my other daughter here in Melbourne. And they turned around and said, Dad's wearing nail polish and's got new glasses. What's going on?
Yes.
So then we had to tell her. And I asked them not to, because my oldest daughter knew, because she got told the same day as my ex.
Yeah.
But we asked them not to say anything until I told my son. And I actually saw my son in person and told him.
I outed myself in person to my children. I one daughter first, and then, you know, well, by the time I managed to sort of get back to Melbourne, and because I was working in country Victoria at the time, and my daughter sort of couldn't keep it to herself, and because I wanted to do it in person, just like you were suggesting. So how did they react?
Well, it was basically a case of one of them turned and said, well, I don't have a father anymore. I said, yes, I'll always be your father. Nothing will ever change that. And I'm not here to take the place of your mother.
Yeah.
You're always going to have your mum as your mum. I'm just going to be, as well as your father, a friend, I hope. And that's what it's been with the three girls. So the son's a different story. He's not happy with my choices.
I don't think there's any easy way to overcome that. I know in my own case, I've one of my sons initially was had other things that he wanted to sort out, but then as time went on, it sort of age comes into it as well. Sort of doesn't really matter now. It's not an issue.
I hope he does come around eventually. I've told him I'll always be there for him if he needs me. But unfortunately, his girlfriend's just had a baby boy and I've still got to meet him.
At the time you've outed yourself now, were you able to out yourself at where you work?
Yes, that was the funny part. When I decided to do something at work, I spoke to the union rep and told him I was trans. And because I have a small company at that stage, I was running, employing 3 or 4 people. And one of them was his wife. So I said, it's up to you whether you tell your wife, for the simple reason being I don't want you to have arguments with her about trying to hold secrets.
Yeah.
So if you have to, you have to. And it worked out quite well because they actually invited me out as Monique for the first time, for me going out as Monique, which helped me get the ball rolling.
How did that make you feel?
Great. Because I'd done it before, just to Kmart or somewhere like that, and I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know if I was going to hide the male features enough. And when they invited me out, I gave them the option of either going as my previous self or as Monique, and they said, as I please. So I did. I went as Monique. And every time we went out after that, it was always as Monique.
They're effectively your employer, is that?
No, the wife was my staff.
Yeah.
The other, because I worked for an Australian company with the different departments around the state. He was the union rep for the basically the depot that we work out of.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And that was early in the year. I decided I wasn't going to live the double life anymore, and I was going to work as him and coming home as and being Monique. And at stages, I got to the stage where I couldn't wait to get home.
And that can be very, debilitating on your mental health, is sort of swapping one to the other without some means of being able to, have a sense of, I can make my life work that way. But when you chop and change, it becomes quite stressful.
Well, it is, because you just reminded me of the when I had my first endocrinologist appointment. I went to the endo as Monique. It's actually the 22nd of June in 2018. Remember the day well. I had to pick my mother up. She was staying with me for a couple of weeks. And, of course, I had to stop and find somewhere to change out of my clothes, put Michael's clothes on, get off all the makeup, the nail polish, then go and pick her up, take her, and then have to live the double life with Mum in the house, which made it even harder.
When or what circumstance allowed you to out yourself to your mum?
I knew I had to tell Mum. Mum's health hasn't been the best over the last 12 years. Had a heart attack, triple bypass, a couple of strokes. So it was a case of, do I tell Mum or don't I? And what was going through my mind with Mum is, if I tell Mum and something happens, it's my fault according to the rest of the family. If I don't tell Mum, well, then I'm not going to be happy, and then it's going to be something else being said. So I spoke to my sister, and when I told her, I said, now, do I tell Mum or don't I? And she said, Mum has the right to know. So after an hour of sitting down with my sister, and I finally got up the guts to go and tell Mum. And I couldn't tell her anyway, because we went into Mum's caravan. She was saying, what's wrong? What's wrong? My sister kept saying, there's nothing wrong. Then she just turned and said, it's trans. Mum sat back and said, is that all?
So
yeah.
Anticlimax.
Yeah.
Go back to what you said right at the beginning there, a fairly strict religious family, to suddenly having, well, years later, admittedly, having your mum sort of say, oh, is that all?
Yeah, it was a big shock to the system, yeah.
So was, in that sense, then your dad really the strict religious person?
Dad always said that if he hadn't met Mum, it was going to be sister Mum. She was going to join the nunnery. So we go to church on a Sunday. Dad'd sit in the car. We get dragged by the scruff of our necks to go to church every Sunday as kids. We had no choice. So, but Dad was brought up in a Catholic family as well, the English family.
I grew up in a Catholic family, but as I've said, other conversations there, that the mum and dad weren't dogmatic. We still went to the Catholic schools and the like, and even was an altar boy, from the youngest age possible through to my teens. But I think one of the things is that because mum and dad weren't dogmatic, that whenever issues arose, even though I still kept this side of my life hidden, well, probably like you in the early days, you didn't understand what was wrong and therefore you couldn't deal with it. But, if you had fights or anything, the issues were dealt with straight away. And, now we move on, but there was always a sense that things got dealt with, were always well looked after, well loved. And So there was never really any of this stop that God will make you go blind type stuff, you know.
No, there's none of that. It was just that some dad's attitude, you knew what his attitude was towards gays. And that's something that stuck through life all the time, even after he passed.
So since then, how's your life progressed?
Well, that later on that year, Mum was in tears. She apologised. She said she can never call me Monique. In which at her age now, she's 86.
Yeah.
I don't push the issue with her because a lot of with her strokes and that she does forget a lot. So with Mum, it's fine. She can call me by my dead name. It doesn't faze me. Other than that, anyone else that calls me by my dead name, I give them back a mouthful of cheek and use a few names that they don't like.
So you've got good support from your sister?
We haven't spoken in about 3 years, so we had another disagreement. So it's been on and off disagreements over the years. So.
And the kids are still very supportive?
Three of them are, yes. I only talk to my son when he needs something or wants something.
Yeah.
So, but I haven't turned my back to him, so I'll always be there for him.
And you're able to be full-time at work?
I did that I applied to have my birth name changed on my birth certificate, and that came through on the 21st of December. And it was the day of the company breakup. And that was the day that I came out at work at the breakup.
How did that go with your work colleague?
A few had already known beforehand, because the first time that Faye and Steve and I went out, someone else saw me, didn't say a word for the whole year, and a couple of other people picked up on it. Same thing, didn't say anything. And they weren't surprised when I turned up as Monique at the Christmas party. And then the others were, yeah, fine, asked a few questions and that was it.
Even though they haven't really asked any questions, they treat you still quite well at work?
The only question I got asked out after that was from the assistant manager. Said, what happens if I call you by your dead name? I said, well, it's a bit hard to go mad at you when I'm still trying to get my tongue around it when I ring up and say, g'day, it's so-and-so, and I say my dead name.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard. So it's got to get time for both of us. So
sometimes I feel like it's if you get too precious about people, accidentally and not deliberately, misgendering you, sort of thing. The only time I really worry about is if it's clearly deliberate, and then I might quietly sort of say to them, please do this. But if it's accidental, just let it wash over me now.
Yeah. Well, he did it one day. I rang him and he said, g'day, Monique, how are you? And said, I was. And after about 10 minutes, he turned around and said, see you later, call me by my dead name, and hung up. And I had to laugh because he rang me straight back and apologised. So, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's when people do it deliberately.
Having sort of touched upon lots of aspects of your life from young to now, how do you feel in yourself?
Great. A lot better.
What are the things that you find that make your life better?
I'm living what I want to be, who I am. In 2020, I had the surgery, so I'm not ashamed to admit it. It's part of who I am now. And I've never felt better. This is me. This is who I've always wanted to be. I only wish that I could have done it earlier in life if I'd have known more. On
that really positive and uplifting note, thank you for joining us in conversation today, and we wish you the best for the rest of your life, as it were.
Thank you.
I'm Greer McGeary. Thank you for watching Bent TV. My guest has been Monique Jade.